Dom.
Hey Jenna,
Hey, how's it been? I forgot my
it's been
glasses.
it's been good. It's been a whole
I can see you
whole
now.
oh, I don't know if it's a good thing.
It's always a good thing to see you.
As I
But you
try
were
to
saying
adjust
it's been a
myself.
whole
Week since
week?
we've been in touch, so
Well, that's how the show goes
we've
when you
got
have a weekly show.
no, but I mean like it's we over finally we were done with the presidential
Oh,
debate.
right.
I knew that was going to be a shit show.
Yeah, that was traumatizing. All right, well, on that note, let's start the show. Hi, I'm Jenna,
And I'm Dom, and we're both award winning journalists.
who've recently been laid off.
Our industry is experiencing a seismic shift, and it's shed a lot of really good journalists.
So, where does that leave us? Well, we're definitely laid off.
And we're looking for new jobs, looking for what's left of the industry, and what to do next.
And we're looking at all of it. So if you're a fellow laid off journalist, a working journalist, or someone who admires the craft, we're looking to build community.
Develop new skills, and try to figure out what just happened.
Welcome to Laid Off and Looking. Yeah, that debate. So actually, I should, for clarification's sake, say that I got my wires crossed a little bit with my assignment, my freelancing assignment for WBAI and Pacifica Radio.
Mhm.
And I, in fact, was not covering the debate. I was covering what took place in DC on Saturday. And that was I believe it was called the Moral March. It was part of the Poor People's Campaign. And basically, it was advocating for all of the needs of working class and lower income people, which is a laundry list. But I thought it was very interesting how, while nobody directly referenced the debate, because that was bad, there was a
Bad.
lot of referencing of how they are the swing vote. And, they can swing an election with their votes. And while I don't doubt the truth in that, I do find it interesting that low income people somehow there seems to be like a split depending on either where you are in the country or frankly just along racial lines because we've
Hmm.
seen polling has showed us that low income white people seem to be voting one way and low income people of color seem to be voting a different way. And all of that is considering even if people decide to go to the polls, because there's
Hmm.
also a considerable amount of malaise going into this election, and that debate did not help anything.
The debates did not help.
It was bad.
I didn't know. I think when we left last week, I was like, I knew it was going to be some kind of a shit show. I tried watching it. I did not last very long. After a few minutes, I was just like, I've seen enough. And then I just watched
Yeah.
all the clips online because it was just like, yeah, kind of got the vibe where it was heading and didn't really need to watch the rest of the car wreck. So,
So I survived by I had it on in the background and in my office I can hear the television without watching it. So
mhm,
I was on my computer and I was going through Twitter. And Twitter was my saving
yeah,
grace for this because there was nothing but dark humor because I don't think there was any other proper reaction to that. So that definitely made stomaching that debate a lot easier. I
it,
probably would have been stomach flips and everything had I watched it.
I heard a lot of people talking about how Twitter was for a number of people the place to go to, which is it's sort of, it's not to say it's had its, down period over the past few years.
Hmm.
But a lot of people felt this is where Twitter shines, in terms
Yes.
of, real time watching something, political news happening and
Hmm.
people reacting to it. So it really sort of got the pulse of how people felt about this. And
100%. And horrified was the feeling. Trust me. Horrified. So
horrified
yeah.
is right.
But I think that's my getting my wires crossed is indicative of this, I don't know, new life that I'm building for myself right now. I'm learning part of what I'm learning to do as a freelancer is not only wear multiple different hats, but also juggle different schedules and like who is asking for what from me, etc.
Mhm.
And I'm trying very hard to not get those wires crossed. And much like my twice drive out to Yale,
Oh, yes.
Um, I didn't miss the, event at all. So that's good.
That's good.
But yeah, I'm trying not to get my wires crossed and being able to clearly focus on exactly what it is that I'm doing and for who and what are the parameters and what do people need. And by the way, I'm gonna have like 30 W-9s when this year's. I mean, it's nice, but it's also just like, oh my God, this is gonna be overwhelming. So
Ugh.
yeah.
Well, that kind of leads into our we have like a mini episode, of course, and this is kind of leads to our next guest, right?
It totally does, actually, because you really can't get enough perspectives on freelancing. You really can't. Dom, have you considered any freelancing in your future, or is it also just like, I don't know what is going on?
I mean, I've been looking more so for something full time. I mean, I guess I'm open for something freelancing wise, but it's just different for producing and what I've been doing. So it's a little bit different than that. So yeah, I've been looking for something full time or trying to think of some other stuff. But yeah, I mean, I know you've really been in it.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm still not, I'm still, um, I would say doggy paddling. Like I'm not like
Hmm.
a strong swimmer, but we have an interview with a strong swimmer, someone who we spoke to about their freelancing experience. So, um, let's go to that. All right, and joining us this week on the pod, we have Sonia Weiser. Sonia is a journalist and a newsletter creator, and frankly, I am impressed with wearing both hats at the same time. But Sonia, welcome to the pod.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, one of the questions I guess that sticks out in my mind is that, being a journalist can feel so much like an all-consuming thing. But the more I'm learning about the newsletter space, that also seems like an all-consuming thing. So, where exactly do you stand between the two, or are you juggling both still right now?
So I actually just sold the newsletter. This was a long time coming, because I found that while I had created it to be a resource to other journalists, I'd also created it as a way to get my name out there as a journalist who was available for assignments. And ultimately, I found that very quickly, people just associated me with creating a resource, being able to share job opportunities, not being someone who can write. And so my plan basically backfired completely. And because of that, after building up this audience and really making a name for myself as a newsletter creator and a resource, I decided that it was time for me to pursue my original goal of being a writer. I haven't produced anything with much frequency within the past few years. And it was one of those situations where you're applying for something and they're like, give us 10 clips from the past year. And you're like, wow, everything I thought I did this year was from 2020. I guess I'm not a journalist anymore. Um, so in realizing how much time the newsletter actually took up of my life and how much energy, even more so, I really realized that the only way I'm going to have the career I want is to kind of let this thing go. So now I'm working on how I can still be a consultant on this thing that I created and make sure that it maintains the quality and the ethos that I've created while also becoming more of myself and getting my life back.
Sonia, what's the origin story of your newsletter? Like, how did it come about? What led you to it?
So I usually say it's a product of OCD. Um, I It was right around the Me Too movement starting.
Hmm.
All the news about Harvey Weinstein came out. My initial reaction was like, Jesus Christ, I am doing nothing. Because I look at what all these journalists were doing and like the copious amounts of work they were doing to produce these stories and get the word out and make real cultural change. And immediately I was like, I'm not this caliber of journalist. What I am very good at is finding opportunities for other people. If I can't do this like real impactful work on that side, here's something else I can do. Um, And it was also just something I was doing naturally, always trying to look for opportunities, always trying to be the person who gets in touch with the employer at the right time to be like, hey, I'm available, pick me, love me, all of that. And so originally I was just doing it for free. I was just posting stuff on Twitter, just retweeting constantly. And once that news hit, I realized like I am capable of making this into a real resource that is truly helping others. I can disseminate all this information on a platform that isn't contingent upon someone using Twitter or knowing how to use Twitter or having time for Twitter. So that's really how it started. And it was a free resource for a few months. Because I was like, if I make a free resource, everyone will love me. Like my ego will be boosted as much as it possibly could. And then after a few months, I realized like I was looking for work so I could sustain a free resource rather than just saying like, hey, can you throw me $1 every month? And then I can spend more time on this. So it started as $1 a month. And then I like worked up the courage to charge $3 a month. Now I charge $5 a month. And it's still donation based. So it's pay what you can, sliding scale. But yeah, the motivation has always been, how can I use the skills I have to create something that can actually be helpful and be a product that I would use as a journalist.
One of the things I'm wondering, and first and foremost, for anybody who's listening to this and is just like, wait, what newsletter?
Oh yeah.
Oh, what exactly is the newsletter, just so we can add it into the show notes for people?
Yeah. So it's opportunities of the week. It's a roundup of all of these opportunities for freelance writers that are posted on Twitter. Because unlike traditional jobs, these aren't things that are posted on job boards. They're not easy to find. It's really a matter of seeing a thing at the right time, being the right person, like the right number of person in line who gets in touch. So if you're someone who has a full-time job and wants to be a freelance writer, or who is a caretaker, or who just like doesn't have the time and the means to waste a lot of it on Twitter waiting for something to come up, then you're basically screwed. Like you're not going to find these opportunities anywhere else, which is unfair because I mean, there are so many barriers to being a freelance writer and to making a career as a freelance writer to begin with. Why should there be this initial obstacle just to like get a job? So yeah, so that was the overall point of the newsletter, just to kind of democratize the system a little bit more.
Yes, I feel like sometimes so many things like that can be so easily gatekept that so many people are like, but I had no idea. But the other question that I also wanted to ask you, that I think a lot of us journalists, especially those of us who are unemployed, are grappling with right now is, how do I, step away and maybe do something else, engage in some other kind of, either do a different job or engage in some different kind of content creation, and still feel as though I am a journalist, like I am still engaging with this discipline.
Yeah. I mean, so there's this quote that I love that it's on my wall. So I'm gonna walk towards it.
Oh, we're taking a
It's
trip.
about living in New York City, but I think it really heavily applies to being a journalist. It says, to live in this city for any extended period of time required masochism, moral flexibility, skin like an alligator's, and mad Jack-in-the-Box resilience. It's from the book Night Film. And I always love that quote because it definitely rings true to living in New York City.
Mhm.
But I was thinking about it last night, and I think that also rings so true for journalism of like, if you need to make a living, being this like ultimate moral compass in the journalism industry might not work for you. As much as we want to stick with journalism, stick with this thing that we're told is a calling and that you need to sacrifice your entire life in order to make it work. And like, you can mess up your entire family dynamic, but ultimately journalism is the like higher, I guess the um, higher value thing.
This is all hitting way too toxically close to
Mhm.
home.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's just, it's not worth it. And even if you sell out for a year or 2 years or 3 years, journalism or will hopefully always be there. It's very unclear right now if journalism will still be there in 3 years. But I mean, we live in a capitalist society. We do have responsibilities. Pretending that like working as a staffer for a paper that doesn't pay you much is the only real way to be a journalist is just unreasonable. And yeah, I think it's just unfair that that's the message we've been preached, that if you leave journalism, you're no longer a journalist. You no longer have the potential to go back to journalism. You've officially sold out. You've like crossed to the other side. And now your name is going to be, smeared with mud forever and ever. And which is just incredibly unfortunate because there are so many paths you can take as a writer that may value you even more than as a journalist. Um, which is something I'm trying to figure out now also of like, how do I transition to copywriting or how do I transition to marketing? Because it is an inherently evil space to be in. And I think we're also taught that like if you go into marketing, you're less than. If you go into PR, you're less than. Like I've heard people refer to PR folks as like, oh, they're just like dumb girls. It's like, no, these are people with actual skill sets.
Yeah.
They just
Mhm.
take their skills in other directions that aren't journalism.
I do wonder if sometimes journalists can dismiss PR people simply because, your inbox gets filled with, pitches that sometimes are just like, wait, what? But anyway, I
I
don't
also kind
quite
of
get
just
that
love
dismissive.
pitches. I think they're really fun to read, but I'm very much in the minority on that one. Uh, like I truly don't mind. I'm like, yeah, let's find out about these like mushroom based potato chips. Actually, I got a bunch of them because I knew my boyfriend would love them and he was obsessed with them. So like
Oh, well, see, then there you
press
go.
release did its job. I didn't write about it, but they have a fan. So
But so you actually you went from, you started your own business, and I think what a lot of journalists do, the space we're in right now, just like Jenna and I too, trying to figure out creating one's own business and being, and sometimes you have the skills of being a good writer, a good journalist, but you don't have the business sense. Did you have that business sense when you started your newsletter? When you started you mean like, do you have that, or is that something you developed, or is it something like, how do you kind of, and also what is your advice for people who are thinking of starting something on their own?
I mean, I think it was a bit of both. I've definitely gotten better with all of that over time, but I think I do have a natural kind of business savvy, even if I never labeled it as such at the beginning.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I do have a lot of these administrative skills and like go get 'em attitude that puts me at an advantage when trying to start a business. Um, and I think what a lot of people who want to start a business don't realize is that starting a business is not necessarily a good idea. Like, it sounds like a fun idea, but if you aren't someone who has the like self-motivation, or in my case, just like a big ass ego who wants to be validated, um, or someone who like is good at administrative work or is good at just being like just pursuing things to the end of the earth, then it's okay that it's not for you.
Hmm.
It's also okay to try something, realize it's not for you, and just be like, hey guys, sorry, I like thought this would work and it doesn't work. Um, and I think that's also a big misconception among a lot of people who are trying to go freelance is that freelancing isn't necessarily a solution to being unemployed. If you don't have the skill set to wake up in the morning, get your shit together, like chase after payments, chase after editors who don't respond. If you don't have the mental capacity or the emotional capacity to handle that kind of work, then you're ultimately going to be wasting your time trying to. And it's something that's incredibly hard for me to tell people because they'll email me being like, hey, I've been doing this for 3 years. No one's taking my pitches. Am I just like pursuing a dream that's never going to come true? And I'm like, yeah, I think so. And then they get mad or they don't respond. It's like, well, you asked for my advice. You're doing something that isn't working. What do you want me to say? Like, keep at it? Like, find something else you can write on the side. Like, I know there's all those stories about people who like are homeless and then write their things on napkins and, get published, which is great for them, but those are in the minority. And
I also feel like that's when those stories get told that way, it's almost like a spin because you're telling a fraction of the story. Like, in all fairness, that's not the full, but it can gas up people's heads to be like, oh my God, it's just so easy.
right.
No.
Yeah, like I forget the writer of Squid Game. I know there was some big story about how it was like a rags to riches experience. I think I vaguely remember that.
Oh, okay. Well, one of the other things that I was sort of wondering is, given your experience, I mean, you've been able to make a living for yourself as a freelancer,
Mhm.
but I guess what keeps you in the freelance space when it can be so incredibly difficult, when it demands that you have all of these other skills that you don't necessarily get paid for, that can be, so hand to mouth versus, a steady job, if there is such a thing anymore, but,
Yeah.
a steady, reliable job that more of us, I think, are traditionally taught to go after. What keeps you in the freelancing space?
Mostly just not getting steady jobs. Um, it was kind of one of those things where I just learned from getting fired that I'm not a steady job person. Um, and and I recognize all of the faults I had now as an employee that like, oh yeah, there was very reasonable for them to fire me. But after you get fired enough, you start to think like, I can never do this. I'm broken. My only option is to work for myself. Um, and then now that I've been working for myself for so long, I can't imagine going back to being a staffer anywhere or just having a full-time job anywhere. Not only because I enjoy my freedom and I enjoy having a schedule when I want and using my insomnia to like get work done at 4 a.m. and all of that, which I did last night. Um, but yeah, I mean, there are pros and cons to it, of course, but it's just it works for the way my brain works. Um, and that's not that way for everyone. A lot of people want the stability. And if they want that stability, I would say go find it.
Hmm.
But yeah, for me, it just became the only way I could really moderate and tolerate my life. I kind of
Sonia,
forget what question you asked me, but hopefully that answered it.
it's so interesting to me because we were talking before about um in terms of like stories we hear of people who become, sell their book on, whatever. You always have these stories of what we can consider success, right? Like this is what I want to be. I want to be the biggest. Um, and it's interesting because I feel like so much of it is about people kind of leaning into finding a different level. Like success is so different for each of us when we really tap into it, not listening to what maybe it's not just about the money. And it is about we do have to make money to sustain ourselves, but like success can mean a lot of different things. Um, were you always that way? Is that something that you along the way, is it something that you started saying to yourself, okay, listen, I'm going to do my own thing, and this is what I see as successful. And with that, I guess also what's your advice for people to honestly look like all of us look at ourselves sometimes, whether we've been fired or laid off, it's tough finding work, but how can we find success in that?
I mean, success is definitely different for everyone. As I made the newsletter, the goalpost changed over time. Originally, it was how can I, help people, obviously, which is still definitely a goalpost. And then it was, can I make a thing that'll pay for my utilities? And then after I reached that, it was, can I make a thing that'll pay for my rent? And then it was like, it slowly grew over time as I kept going. And I think with a lot of people, their goalposts change over time as they achieve one thing. The next that seems mediocre, and then they have to achieve the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I don't know if that's just what we've been taught to do, or if that's just how our school system has kind of like programmed us. I know that was very much how my high school like operated. It was like, you are not good enough until you are the best. Um, and we always know that like the people who are the best get rewarded the most. So of course you're like all trying to achieve that. But if you find happiness not at the like being the absolute best, but just getting by, or just like making a life you enjoy leading, I mean, that's your success. Like, you don't have to go past that if that doesn't interest you. Something I talk about a lot with friends is like, do we want our jobs to be the thing we care about, or do we want our jobs to be the thing that makes us money so we can have a life we enjoy? And just trying
Ooh.
to find that balance and realizing that like maybe you hate your job, but it gives you time and money to volunteer, to
Hmm.
go to cultural events that you're excited about, to travel. Like,
Hmm.
what are your actual priorities? And if you're meeting those priorities, then that's success.
So true.
That's actually a great way to look at it. Sonia, before we let you go, we have a question that we always ask all of our guests, given that, we're a podcast about journalism. How did you land at this job? How did you get here? What was it in you that was just like, yeah, I want to do that for a living?
I mean, like a lot of people, it was like the one person who championed us from a very young age. Like, one teacher was like, "You're a great writer." And I was like, okay, I like being great at things. Um, yeah, so first grade, a teacher was like, "You're a great writer." And then someone else copied my story. And I was like, ha ha ha, I'm clearly better than you. This is fantastic. My little like first grade mind. Um, and yeah, so I just kept pursuing that. And like at that age, writing is fun. You have no idea that writing can be anything but fun. And then I kept doing that as I got older, all this creative writing. And I was like, this is so, like, just, this is such a form of joy for me to be writing whatever I want. And then once you realize that's a job, you're like, oh, okay, I should pursue that because it's a thing that I love. And then ultimately that kind of ruins it. Um, but then you're stuck with all this writing experience and nowhere to go but into writing. So I studied journalism and creative writing at school. Again, got a lot of positive feedback. So I was like, all right, I'm in this. And then I had a part or a full-time staffer position at a website that may or may not still exist. Never really enjoyed it, wasn't very good at it, got fired. Um, and that was my first and only full-time writing gig. And then I had a few other full-time jobs, or no, just one other full-time job after that. And then in 2016, I was fired from that slash quit. It was a complicating situation. Um, and then, yeah, no, then I was just like, all right, well, I guess I'm freelancing now because clearly I can't do this full-time job thing. So here we are.
Well, here we are. Well, I think that here we are wherever that is
Yeah.
where a lot of us are attempting to figure out what's going to work for us.
Yeah.
Sonia, I want to thank you so much for taking time to stop and talk with us and share your freelancing journey and your newsletter writing experience.
Yeah, of course.
Because yeah, there's a lot to be figured out. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Laid Off and Looking is an independent podcast conceived of and created by Jenna Flanagan and Dominic Kemia. Music provided by Jay Cowett, research by Lori Ruthenbucker. Reach out to us anytime at laidofandlookingpod@gmail.com. New episodes drop every Friday at noon.